I'm a person living off-grid with her family in Vermont. Ask me anything. We're a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 kids, living off-grid on a self-built homestead in Vermont. I'm making jam and canning today. I thought I could answer questions for anyone interested while things simmer on the wood stove. Off-grid means not connected to or served by publicly or privately managed utilities, such as electricity, gas, or water. Disclaimer, we do have internet before anyone points to the obvious. What's your typical day-to-day life? Like, do you spend a large amount of time getting the basic utilities for the day? Our typical day involves a lot of moving water. We start the day moving wood in for the day, getting water for showers and dishes, and consumption on the stove in the morning so we have hot water throughout the day. Feeding the fire is a big task, as wood is our only heat source. It gets cold in the winter in Vermont. In January/February, we have to wake up every hour and a half to feed it. There's a lot of baking and cooking. Things are a bit different on a wood stove. On a weekly basis, we spend time weeding the gardens, weeding the orchard, splitting wood, getting wood from our woodlot. There's always a project that disrupts the flow of daily life. You have to feed your stove that often? I only have wood heat too. I'd die, lol. In the worst of winter, it's usually about every 6 hours. North Ontario, Canada. I couldn't manage without running water either. I have a well and use a generator to pump what I need. You're a brave girl. I'll think of you in February. Our wood stove is not very efficient. It's a cook stove first, but it heats the home. We built an addition on our tiny house last year and now have a second real wood stove. We're hoping that it'll burn wood slower. I don't have a job and we have weird sleeping patterns, so it hasn't really been an issue. We plan on having our sleeping quarters in the living room in the future to be able to feed the stove to be closer to it. Ask us again in 10 years, maybe we'll cave and have a generator to pump water. Do you go to the store to get food/supplies ever? If so, how often? For what? And what changes in the retail industry could be made to make more people less reliant on them? I go to the store all the time. Even though the goal is to one day have at least 90% of our food supply covered by our gardens/animals, we're at least 5 years away from that goal. We still buy clothes too at thrift shops, and we buy feed for our chickens. We rely heavily on Amazon for weird stuff we would never be able to find, special tools to build. It saved us a ton of trips to stores. I don't know about changes in the retail industry. I think society needs to work on overconsumption though. What do you two do for work, and how do you handle sharing the responsibilities of raising your children? I'm about to have my first child, and I've just got a job as a traveling wind turbine technician. My partner and I are very interested in living off-grid, but a bit apprehensive due to the challenges we may experience being first-time parents. My husband is a sysadmin. I was a librarian, but quit my job after 8 months of living off-grid. I was enjoying being on the land more than my job. As for sharing responsibilities with raising children, well, we've fallen in our gender roles. I do the cooking, tending the gardens, doing laundry, taking care of the children, and he does the building houses, doing the heavy lifting. It happens slowly, and part of me hates the fact that I'm happy in this situation. I was raised by a stay-at-home mom and vowed to never be just a mom. I've kept a few side jobs for my sanity and to bring in a bit of money. I'm a freelance reporter for a local newspaper, do communication for the school in town, am a recording secretary for school boards. Off-grid just means not connected to public electricity/water supply networks, right? Why does everyone think it means homeschooling/not vaccinating/not buying things online? I blame movies and books. I just finished Educated. I think that's what people picture when they think off-grid. Why did you guys decide to keep internet and phones? We're okay with that feature in our life. My husband works in tech and sometimes has to work from home. We're okay with being connected to society in some forms. Are your kids/will they be homeschooled? We have a great public elementary school right down the road. We also speak French at home, and I don't think I have it in me to homeschool. If he's ever discontent with the school, maybe, but at this point we're very happy. Our town doesn't have a high school, so we're a sending town, which means that you can send your kid to any middle or high school you want, and they'll pay the tuition. What's the toughest day you've had off the grid? Ever consider grabbing a hotel room for the night? We went to a hotel for 2 nights once, because it was too hot, and even though we tried to cool the house down, we just couldn't. Don't try the cooler with ice and a fan trick, it doesn't work, folks. I was breastfeeding at the time, and was so dehydrated from the heat I wasn't producing milk. So to the hotel we went for 2 nights. It wasn't really a tough day. The hardest day was probably when I came home from the hospital with a newborn and a C-section, barely able to move. Our living arrangements include a lot of physical labor, carrying wood in, feeding the fire, heck, just taking a shower means carrying water around. It wasn't hard physically because my husband and son were super helpful and I didn't really have to do anything, but it was hard mentally. I questioned a lot why we were doing this, instead of living in suburbia somewhere closer to family. Okay, why are you off the grid? How do you educate yourself on these matters? We wanted to live in Vermont and fell in love with a piece of land without a house on it. We were completely new to building, we'd only built a chicken coop prior to our house, and had a limited budget. We knew we didn't want to take a mortgage to build, so we went with the most basic cabin we could reasonably build in a short time. We figured we would add features and utilities as money would allow. 5 years in, and we're still fine with not having running water or a constant supply of electricity. We learned everything from YouTube videos and talking to neighbors and friends who've built their own homes too. Do you mind sharing details of your background and possibly of your husband's? Like where/type of family raised in, schooling, what you were doing before this. Anything you think of that led you to this life choice. Also, thanks for the Ask Me Anything. I find what you're doing cool and fascinating. We think about this a lot, how we got here. We were both raised in big European cities. My happiest memories as a kid were spending summers on my aunt's homesteads in Hungary, where my family's from originally. Other than that, we read Goat Song, a beautiful book if you're looking for a good read. It's about a couple moving to Vermont to raise goats. We read it together out loud when my firstborn was a baby. It was a fascinating story, and we were ready for a big change in our lives. I was fresh out of college, my husband was ready to try a new job. It was perfect timing to move, and we had no family where we lived, and very few friends. Why Vermont in particular? As a Vermonter, I'm always curious to see why people move here. We were looking for a place that was not too religious, having moved from the most religious state in the US, that was closer to Europe so family can visit, we're both from Europe originally, not too hot, we like long winters, that was rural but with a university we could work at. We applied for jobs in several states that met those criteria and moved to Vermont soon after. We've been there for close to 9 years. Given that it gets pretty cold in Vermont during the winter, how much wood do you chop for that? Do you buy some or gather it all yourselves? We gather it on our land. We use about 3 cords I think, but it's pretty hard to say because we usually run out way before winter ends, and we just cut down ash tree, you can burn it green as we go. This year though, we're starting the season with oak and plenty of maples. We hope one day to have a few years of surplus. One day. I wanted to chime in. As a dad that raised my family, 3 children, off-grid in the Rockies for 5 years, after living in the concrete jungle of Houston, I don't think people understand the ramifications of making a move like that. This is a very hard life, not just for the adults but for the kids. When children get hurt/sick, as they often do, they're exacerbated by the increased distance to facilities/lack of facilities, among other things. Kids still have to go to school, and the associated responsibilities, school functions, unless you're homeschooling, not to mention the isolation. While it can bring a family closer, it can also cause a lot of friction. As my off-grid neighbor mentioned to me, I give you 5 years. When I asked why, he said, people tend to fall out of love with the idea of off-grid living between year 4 and 5. I don't regret it, but I definitely wouldn't do it again. We're at year 5 and still loving it. Our son has a chronic condition. We're 30 minutes, 17 once when we drove very fast at 1 AM, from a major hospital that has helicopters too. It was part of the equation when moving to this piece of property. I don't think I could live anywhere else off-grid but here in Vermont, mainly because I found my people. I found friends who have the same values and have kids. We've limited our social events to once a week because we had too many social interactions. We send our kid to public school. I feel like we have the best of both worlds. But I agree, it is hard sometimes, and it can be extremely hard depending on where you are. We seriously considered Alaska for a while. I am glad we didn't. Awesome! I grew up in rural Vermont, about as off-the-grid as you can be without committing to the idea. Farmer out in a place called Browington. Population used to be like 20 to 40 at any given time. Do you sell produce? I'd gladly buy some for my family still in the state. We don't. I sell soap once a year at a local holiday fair, but that's it for now. We do have 400 bulbs of garlic if you need some though.